So our next presenter is from Nokia, and it's exciting to see Nokia taking a bigger role in our industry more recently. And our speaker today is Marc Bellini, the CTO for Nokia Canada. Marc has started his career in software development, working on management systems for satellite-based X25 network vendors. While he spent the majority of his early career continuing to work in software, he's always stayed close to the service provider domain, eventually joining Nokia, Alcatel-Lucent in 2008. And Marc's held various positions on the Canadian sales team since then. He's currently the CTO for the Canadian market team. Marc works with all the aspects of the Nokia portfolio, leading the technical sales teams for the Canadian market. So welcome, Marc. Come on up.
Hey, thanks very much. Can everybody hear me all right? Maybe I'll lift that up a bit. Okay, so we are from Nokia, and Nokia may not be a familiar name to a lot of people in this room, at least not in the context of what we're going to talk about today. Do we have slides or not? Okay, no worries. Yep.
My first cell phone was a Nokia.
And mine was too.
We've heard it before.
I think that's the that's the interesting part. So most people have heard of Nokia and have heard of them because of the cell phone. My first cell phone was Nokia. I used Nokia phones for years, and I'm sure a lot of people in here, if you're from my generation, did the same. That part of our business was actually sold off well over 10 years ago, and I think we sold it to Microsoft, I think, at the time. So you may see Nokia phones floating around today. If you go to, I think they're in Canada, they're in the US for sure, and a lot of them in Europe and in the developing world. But those phones are not actually Nokia phones. They were a phone company called HMD Global that licenses Nokia's name and puts it on the phone. So loosely tied together, but nothing really to do with what we do anymore.
It was there.
It's coming back.
That's all right. We can get going with the slides. So promising. Where do we start? So Nokia, we can go to the next slide. So at Nokia, we're creating the technology that helps the world act together. That's our new statement of purpose, if you will. And thanks. And what that means is that when we look at the way the world is evolving, and we see how people are aging longer, people are leading wealthier lives, there's new challenges in the world in terms of how do we look after people that are aging, how do we take care of the planet, how do we take care of the environment, how do we put together a world that is more equal and less divisive. Nokia believes, and this is a little arrogant on our side, but this is what we do, so we should be. We believe that technology is the answer to a lot of those problems. So we look at, things like, the aging population and what people are doing to look after people. We start to see areas like telehealth developing and in-home systems for keeping people independent longer, becoming a key part of what we're doing. When we look at areas like the environment, the networks are there to help make the best use of the resources that we have. And we're using that across industries. Industry 4.0 is a great example. I appreciated the long talk on Industry 4.0. That's a large part of what we do and part of our business. But it is in helping us enhance the way that we use the resources that we have and helping us make less of a mark on the environment. And then finally, we look at equal opportunity and diversity. And frankly, the pandemic has done a lot for the world in terms of getting us comfortable with digitalization of our lives. But what it has not done is solve the problem of unequal access to that technology. And we look around the world today, and the notion of poor service from an internet access point of view has been heavily exacerbated and put into the spotlight, if you would, by the fact that we had this pandemic come over us. I think the benefit from all of that, we went through a period of time where working became working from home, schooling became schooling from home, shopping became shopping from home, socializing became Zoom calls, and my kids played a lot of Fortnite and Minecraft. At the end of the day, as we start to move back into a more normal society, a lot of those trends are going to stay. And a lot of those trends are going to stay because they're good. And it's good to have that capability so that if my kids are sick and they're staying home, they can still attend class and they can still learn. If I'm sick, I'm not going to the office and making everybody else sick. So there's a lot of good reasons for what we're able to do with that. And I think that's all going to come back with us. And the fact that society is now accepting this digitalization of our world is going to make things better. The problem is it only makes things better when everybody has access to broadband. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. So Nokia has been working, and we can go to the next slide. Nokia has been working in building networks for many years now. Even before we sold the cell phone business, we had a Nokia Networks division. Now that Nokia Networks division is the company. We build networks. We have our company divided into 4 key areas, and we build networks on the mobile side. So a lot of the cell phone networks that you have around the world are powered by Nokia technology, both in the radio side, in the baseband, in the transport, in the core networking technology, whether it be from a subscriber core, a packet core, a voice core. That's all built by Nokia in a lot of cases, and we have a large footprint around the world. We go into cloud and network services. That's building a lot of the core network services that we have today. Voice services, our packet core I mentioned earlier, and some of our billing and charging systems, policy systems, and now increasingly going into areas like security and analytics. On a network infrastructure division point of view, this is the area that's probably most familiar to people in this room, in the sense that we build our access portfolio of products, whether it be from a copper, a fiber, or a wireless perspective. And we build our access networks, our edge networks. So BNG and routing and switching, that backport all of those access lines back into the core network. And then finally, we have a group called Nokia Technologies, and they do things like sell our name to HMD Global so that we can have cell phones that have Nokia written on them. We can go to the next slide. So we look at, I wanted to give you a little perspective on what Nokia is. So Nokia is a Finnish company, and the Finnish actually are really, really close to the Canadians. We are fairly kindred spirits in terms of the type of landscape, the type of geography, the type of cities, the type of personalities. And so when I look at what Nokia is focused on, it actually brings me back very closely to what I see Canadians prioritizing and Canadians focused on. We look at improving people's lives with technology, but we want to do that in a way that is going to be beneficial to the world. So Nokia has actually taken a pledge to reduce our emissions by 50% across all the products that we have in our field and our operations, by 2030. That actually aligns with the global initiative around 1.5 degrees centigrade. So we're doing our part to try and position the company in a responsible way from an environmental point of view. We do prioritize diversity now. We're trying to get to a point, we've recognized not just about trying to have a number up there of how many women work in the company and how many of this and how many of that, but actually looking at it from a team's perspective and saying, hey, within this team, we need diversity because that team will make better decisions if it's diverse. And within this team, we want to have diversity. So we're trying to take everything to a little bit of a next level in terms of how do we work and how do we operate more consistently and how do we make better decisions that are more representative of people out there. And just a little bit of a brag on the end there, we have been voted as one of the world's most ethical companies for 5 years in a row now by Ethisphere. And it's something that we continue to pursue year to year. Obviously, a huge part of what we want to do is operate in an ethical manner. Go to the next slide. So how do we do all of this? Well, we have an amazing research and development engine behind Nokia. There's a company We're a company. There's a group called Bell Labs that is currently called Nokia Bell Labs that's kind of moved around through the ages. Initially was part of, I think, the Bell Telephone Company or Western Bell Electric back in the day, and moved its way through a number of different acquisitions, and it's part of the Nokia portfolio. And it is the R&D engine that does innovation behind the scenes for Nokia. And then as that innovation matures, it comes out and we put it into our products. But some of the incredible things they've done in the past, they were the inventors of the transistor, for example. The transistor powers everything that we do. Every computer, every phone, everything in here is packed full of transistors. So it's a really amazing engine of innovation, and it continues to be a key part of how we deliver innovation and how we ensure that we're technology leaders in the different domains that we play in. Next slide, please. So our ambition for the broadband industry, we like to call it broadband zero. This sounds a little bit negative, but really what it's intended to be is zero people left behind. So we really are trying to focus on how do we get broadband everywhere? How do we find a way to solve for the geographical problems and limitations? How do we solve for the financial limitations? How do we just make sure that we get broadband out to everybody and make it decent broadband? So we do that by providing solutions across copper, across fiber, and across wireless, and we're scaling that whole division to work with service providers from any size, from the two-person mom and pop shop all the way up to the AT&Ts of the world. Zero limits. Zero limits. What we've started to see happen as things like Industry 4.0 come in, and the world starts evolving in terms of broadband demands, is that there's a need for a programmable network. There's a need to interface with the network at a much more intimate level than there has been in the past. We used to build networks, configure them, and leave them alone for 10 years. Nowadays, we build networks, and the networks need to continue to change and evolve and adapt. And as we start to see more, things like the metaverse, dare I say it, or VR, for public safety applications or whatever it might be, come into fruition, all of those things are going to depend on not just a fast network, but a very low latency network. And having the ability to disaggregate applications across that network becomes important. And having the ability to program that network to meet the requirements of a public safety instance or whatever it might need becomes even more important. So all of the networks that we're building in Nokia today are managed in such a way that we can program and slice the networks all the way through, from the core all the way out to the edge. We're even slicing potentially right into the home on the Wi-Fi access points as well. And zero touch. So when you look at a network that goes from being a statically configured network to a network that's going to be changing on an ongoing basis, that becomes an operational nightmare. And frankly, you can't operate a network that's changing all the time. So the network has to operate itself. And so there's been an enormous amount of effort and development put into making these networks run themselves. We no longer look at a network as something that you need to have people sitting and looking at in front of. You have a network that runs itself, optimizes itself, and lets you know when it needs help. And that's the direction we've been taking in our networks. And then finally, zero waste. And that's really just looking at how do we optimize our product development to ensure that we're not positioning something that's going to be ripped out in 3 years. So for example, when we build our new generation of PON cards, all those PON cards are upgradable directly to 25 gig PON. We're not deploying anything that's not upgradable to 25 gig PON anymore, because 10 gig PON is today, GPON was yesterday, and 25 gig is tomorrow. So you need to put something into the network that's ready and upgradable to what's going to be required and what's coming down in the future. Come to the next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about Nokia Any Access Broadband. So this is really just focusing on that area of the network. And Nokia, being an end-to-end company, does solutions from the radio to the access point that either sits on the outside of the house or inside the house, from a wireless perspective to PON networks. As I said, GPON, XGS, 25 gig, we support them all. And all the way through to things like G.fast or G.hn, where if you've got very tricky situations for distribution in the last 100 meters, you can still be delivering gigabit speeds. Next slide. So another bragging slide, since I'm trying to get the word of Nokia out there. So we have been leading in fiber access from a market and technology perspective for a long time. I think we started deploying fiber as GPON back in 2008. So it's a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old technology. It's not something that we deploy much of anymore. We're focused mostly on XGS and XGS upgradable to 25 gig PON now. But we were first to the market with GPON, with XGS PON, and with NG-PON2. We're the #1 GPON market share, excluding China. It's a bit of a different market. We have over 250 customers in 130 countries around the world. We're the first XGS PON, or #1 for XGS PON market share worldwide, according to Dell'Oro. And we're the only vendor to have a leading market share in every region. In addition to that, I think we're somewhere north of 110,000 or 110 million PON ports in production around the world today. So big vendor in the space. Next slide, please. As I said, we've recently launched the industry's first 25 gig PON solution. This is actually available today, and we are doing lab trials with a number of our customers. It is sitting on the same line card that supports GPON and XGS PON. It sits in our existing nodes as well as back portable to our legacy nodes, SDN enabled, and it is the only time-sensitive networking PON solution that's available on the market today. And that becomes important as we start to look at PON as a potential source for 5G backhaul. 5G time sensitivity becomes a lot more stringent than it was in 4G, and time-sensitive networking becomes a critical part of being able to deploy that. Okay, next slide. All of this is done, and this is part of the core direction that we take in terms of innovation. We've done a lot of our own chip development. So on the PON side, we're developing a chip called Quillion. That chipset integrates a huge number of the elements that you would traditionally have to put onto a PON card into one single chipset. And what that does is it lowers power consumption by 40 to 50%. It lowers mean time, or it increases mean time between failure because you've reduced the number of components in the card, which frankly lowers e-waste, lowers power. It's better for the environment. We've managed to push to a place where we've got a 25G upgradable PON because we were building our own chipsets. That's something that we couldn't have done with merchant silicon. We do chipset development across most of our technologies. In our mobile network technology, we develop our own chipsets. In our routing, we develop our own chipsets. And in our optical transport, we also develop our own chipsets. So it's a key part of the innovation engine behind Nokia. Next slide, please. So why do we need 25 gigabits per second? And, I think everybody here is, and I heard earlier that the requirements for applying for funding were going from 525 to 1050. And frankly, I don't think that's enough. I think we should be pushing a lot harder than that. We look at the different generations of networking speeds. We had 100 megabits per second speeds or below that sort of generated a certain number of applications. As we opened up to gigabit speeds, we started to see other applications flow into the network. And what consistently we've seen is as you build the speed up, applications and consumption will come in and take that available bandwidth and use it. So while we see 10G PON or next generation PON, XGS PON becoming the standard right now, which is an amazing amount of bandwidth, we do see that as we move towards next generation services, that's going to start to fill up. 25G has already got use cases attached to it in the enterprise space and in the mobile backhaul space. And we see the need to continue to pursue and continue to drive for more. Next slide, please. Fixed wireless access is taking off. This is an area that we started playing in a number of years ago, and we've started to see it become a favorite deployable solution for hard to reach areas. If you're using the right technology and the right amount of bandwidth, you can overcome some of the propagation issues. You can overcome some of the distances or some of the speed potential speed challenges that you might have, but it does require bandwidth. It does require spectrum, and there are some limitations to how we can do that. That said, I think we have shipped more fixed wireless access indoor units than anyone else in the world last year. So we're doing a huge amount of business with folks like T-Mobile, who are offering their broadband home service over fixed wireless access because they don't invest in a copper or a fiber network. Next slide, please. Just a little bit more on the different flavors and solutions that we have available in our Fast Mile or our fixed wireless access solution. So we've got indoor units, we've got 5G, 4G units, we've got outdoor units that connect to an indoor unit, obviously. And then we've got the whole in-home distribution as well. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. The indoor units obviously are predominantly targeted at more metro type environments because the gain is just not high enough to receive signals from outside, but we have outdoor units that are designed to work in the rural areas as well. Okay, next slide. So what are some of the key challenges of the access industry? The broadband traffic is getting bigger. We're starting to see, we've always seen traffic be scaling at an unbelievable rate. I think some of the newer challenges that are coming in are around latency and how does that work with the broadband network? How do you drive a better experience? I can't tell you how many times my kids yell at me that their ping time is too high when we're sitting on an old DSL line. And obviously that problem gets solved once you move into fiber. On the agility side, we're starting to see the need to be able to respond with the network to new types of services that are disaggregating over the network and having needs. That's the whole programmable network we talked about a little bit before. We do a lot of work with public cloud vendors right now. A lot of our service provider customers are starting to leverage public cloud as sort of the host for as a service type models. And, you know, if you compare ourselves or you compare the service provider environment to what's happening in public cloud, you know, I think the salient point that they got across here was, you know, 6 to 7 months from initiation of an idea to potentially getting it out there in a service provider world. And, you know, I think it's every 11 minutes there is something changing in an Amazon cloud. So the degree to which we work in a non-CIC, non-constant innovation, constant deployment type fashion is really impacting our ability to innovate. And so Nokia is trying to build the networks to be much more programmable so we can get to a point where we're innovating at the same speed. Third point is automation. I talked a little about this already, so maybe this slide is a little repetitive. I apologize for that. But automation is absolutely key. We spent the last 10 years virtualizing elements of the network, trying to take those proprietary hardware pieces out and move towards standards hardware. That's done a great amount of work in terms of simplifying the way we deploy the networks, but frankly, it hasn't really helped in terms of the operational cost of the network. And now we really have to lean on automation. So this is the time of automation. We're pushing automation across all of our verticals and pushing machine learning and self-organizing networks as much as we can across everywhere. And then finally, convergence at the edge of the network from a performance standpoint. And this is just the idea that we're bringing all these networks together to work uniformly as one. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so where fixed and wireless meet the subscriber. So this is a key point, and Nokia has in the in-home arena, Nokia is reasonably new. So we started to build for in-home about, I think, 5 years ago. And so we are putting a lot of effort into building an in-home environment for our customers. So Nokia has, I mean, the benefit of leveraging a Nokia environment, obviously we have a way to build a hybrid network between wireless to the home and fixed access, whether it be copper or fiber, and provide a really unified experience for the subscriber. Or for the set of subscribers, I should say, as well as for the support people that are working with them. We also have built a class-leading distributed mesh Wi-Fi network for in the home as well. All of this sits on top of a common cloud control layer with mesh middleware, and all of it is based on what we call our home OS, which is effectively based on OpenWDRT and allows us to containerize applications and bring those as new revenue streams into the home as well. Good, next slide, please. The OpenWDRT and containerization of applications is actually something we've developed quite strongly. So we've got a fairly good ecosystem of partners that are building applications for the gateways that allow the service provider that is working with us to either develop their own applications or work with one of our partners or work with a new partner to bring an application and an offering into the gateway, into the home, and add some value back into the customer base. Okay, next slide, please. And last slide, this is my last slide, and I'll hopefully have some questions afterwards. But I wanted to put up a slide just to show you some of the other service providers that we're working with. So while we've traditionally been associated with working with large tier one service providers across the globe, we have a very strong focus in the last 24 months on building up our address of this market, of the rural broadband market. Part of it is because of the fact that we do believe that broadband needs to go everywhere, and we are challenged right now to get it there. And I think that the folks in this room are the ones that are actually making that happen. So we've invested into rural broadband. We've invested in teams in Canada. We've invested in a team up here in Canada, we've invested in teams in the US, and we've started to bring smaller service providers into our customer base. And this is just a list of the public ones that we have available to us that we're working with. So a big push for us. We want to be in this market. We want to help with rural broadband. We have a lot of world-class leading solutions, and we're very focused on helping you guys get there. Thank you. I'll take a couple questions if there's any, or.
Could you give us a little information on how your distribution systems work in Canada, Mark?
Distribution.
Distribution. Do you sell direct to small companies or through distribution?
Oh, no, we do sell direct. We have a team here that works with us that's selling direct into the customer base. You can meet them all at the booth. All right, you're welcome. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark. That was great. Yeah, nice to see an overview of Nokia, and again, great to have you focusing on our industry. It's great to see.